What happens when one of country music's biggest stars finds herself in the middle of a late-night interview that goes completely off the rails? Carrie Underwood, known for her poise and professionalism, walked off the set of The Late Show with Stephen Colbert after an exchange that left the audience in stunned silence. This wasn't a planned bit. This wasn't scripted drama. This was real tension that escalated so fast that even the production crew didn't know what to do. Before we get into exactly what was said that made Carrie stand up and leave, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because this story has layers you won't believe. The evening started like any other late-night taping. Carrie Underwood was booked to promote her latest album and discuss her upcoming tour. She walked onto the stage to roaring applause, dressed elegantly in black, smiling and waving as she always did. Stephen Colbert greeted her warmly, and for the first few minutes, everything felt effortless. The audience laughed. The conversation flowed. Carrie talked about motherhood, life on the road, and the inspiration behind her music. Stephen joked, nodded along, and played the role of the charming host perfectly. For a while, it felt like just another successful celebrity appearance. Carrie was relaxed, open, and engaging. She shared lighthearted stories about balancing family life with a demanding career and reflected on how her perspective had evolved over the years. The crowd was fully on her side, responding warmly to every answer. Stephen seemed genuinely interested, letting her speak and reacting with humor and curiosity. Then something shifted. Stephen leaned back slightly, his tone changing just enough to be noticeable. He brought up the idea of public responsibility, asking about artists and whether they should speak out on social and political issues. The room grew quieter. Carrie paused before answering, choosing her words carefully. She explained that every artist has to decide for themselves, and for her, music was about connection rather than instruction. She emphasized trust in her audience to think for themselves. Stephen nodded, but instead of moving on, he pressed further. He questioned whether staying neutral was even possible in today's climate, suggesting that silence itself could be interpreted as a statement. Carrie's expression tightened. Her voice remained calm, but firmer now. She pushed back, saying it wasn't fair to label people as complicit simply because they didn't share every opinion publicly. The audience could feel it. The warmth that defined the first half of the interview was fading, replaced by something sharper. Carrie shifted in her chair, and Stephen leaned in again, clearly unwilling to let the topic go. And that was only the beginning. Stephen's questions grew sharper, and the subtle tension in the studio thickened. He asked Carrie if she didn't feel a responsibility to her fans, especially younger ones, to state her position on issues that mattered to the world. Carrie's jaw tightened, and the polite warmth she had started with was gone. Her answers became measured but resolute. She explained that she didn't know anyone a public explanation for how she navigated her life or used her voice. She reminded everyone that her work behind the scenes, supporting charities, helping communities, and advocating for causes, quietly, was just as meaningful as speaking out in front of cameras. Stephen didn't relent. He pressed harder, questioning whether Carrie's silence could be considered a choice in itself, suggesting that it might allow injustice to continue unchallenged. Carrie's eyes flashed. She explained that being authentic and staying true to herself had always been her priority. She refused to reduce her beliefs into sound bites or perform them on cue to satisfy anyone's expectations. The audience sat in stunned silence, sensing the friction escalate into something neither had anticipated. Stephen tried again, softer this time, framing his questions as concern rather than confrontation. He spoke about basic decency, equality, and human rights, asking if Carrie felt comfortable addressing these matters. Carrie leaned back, crossing her arms, and calmly, firmly stated that the interview had been hijacked. She had come to talk about music, her career, her tour, and her artistry, not to be cornered into performing a political stance. She told Stephen that if he wanted a real dialogue, it should be mutual, with respect, not a setup designed to trap her. The crowd's energy was electric. Some nodded in agreement, others shifted uneasily. Stephen, visibly frustrated, insisted he was simply asking questions people wanted answered. Carrie responded, her voice steady but cutting. That respect wasn't about questioning someone relentlessly until they broke. She said that intention didn't erase impact. One could mean well, but still cause harm. She told Stephen that asking someone to perform their conscience for applause was manipulative, and that genuine courage didn't require an audience. It required integrity, consistency, and respect for oneself and others, even when no one was watching. The tension climbed higher with every exchange. The studio that had started the night with laughter and applause now held its collective breath. Carrie's words were calm, but each one landed with undeniable force, making it clear she wouldn't yield. Stephen attempted to defend his approach, claiming he was fostering accountability. Carrie cut him off, stating that accountability was meaningless if it ignored boundaries and respect. She reminded him that being a guest didn't strip her of the right to expect courtesy, and she refused to let anyone dictate how she should navigate her own platform. The audience realized. Carrie's posture shifted as she straightened in her chair, a clear signal that she was done bending to anyone's narrative. Stephen leaned in, his voice rising slightly as he insisted that her silence carried consequences. The audience could feel the clash building to a breaking point. Carrie's calm, controlled demeanor was now contrasted sharply with Stephen's increasingly visible frustration. She didn't shout, but every word was precise, carrying a weight that the cameras and studio audience felt instantly. You think that your way of engaging with the world is the only way, Stephen, she said, her tone icy. And anyone who doesn't comply is failing morally. That's not how people work. That's not how life works. The tension was palpable, a mix of disbelief, admiration, and discomfort filling the room. Some audience members nodded subtly in support. Others shifted uneasily, unsure how to react. Stephen's attempts to regain control were becoming less authoritative and more desperate. He tried again, emphasizing his point about accountability, insisting that influence comes with responsibility. Carrie responded steadily, refusing to accept his premise. She reminded him that courage wasn't measured by how loudly someone spoke, or by how easily they conformed to public pressure. True courage was living your principles consistently, even privately, without needing applause. The crowd began to murmur, sensing the raw honesty in her words. The usual late-night laughter and light-hearted energy had vanished, replaced with something intense and real. Stephen attempted to pivot, asking if she agreed with universal principles like human dignity and equality. Carrie's eyes narrowed. She explained that the question itself was missing the point. It wasn't about agreeing or disagreeing on abstract principles. It was about respecting personal boundaries, about not weaponizing someone's answers for headlines. She told him that the entire interview had transformed from a conversation about her music into a contest to see if she would perform her beliefs for the audience's consumption. The audience held their breath as Stephen continued, his voice rising, his gestures becoming more animated. Carrie's calm, deliberate responses contrasted sharply, each sentence a precise counter, demonstrating she was fully in control. She reminded him that she didn't need to justify her actions to anyone. Her contributions to society, the support she gave quietly to causes she cared about, mattered more than any televised declaration. By now, it was clear to everyone present that this was no ordinary late-night interview. Carrie's resolve was absolute, her composure unshakable, and her patience stretched to its limits. The studio atmosphere had shifted into something raw, tense, and unforgettable when she finally began reaching for her purse. The audience understood she was preparing to leave, and the realization sent a ripple of shock through the room. Carrie's movements were deliberate as she picked up her purse, signaling to the audience and Stephen that she was done. The room fell silent. Stephen, realizing the interview was slipping completely out of his control, stepped forward, his voice almost pleading. "Carrie, please, let's just work this out. We can still have a conversation." She didn't turn immediately. Her eyes scanned the room, landing briefly on the audience, then back to Stephen. Her voice, calm but cutting, carried across the studio. "A conversation requires mutual respect and good faith. What you've done for the last several minutes is neither." She paused, letting the words sink in. Before continuing, "You've been trying to corner me, force me to say something you can use, and twist it into a narrative that benefits you. That's not conversation. That's confrontation. And I refuse to participate." Stephen's frustration was evident. His gestures became more pronounced, his attempts to assert authority faltering as Carrie's composure never wavered. He argued that asking questions was part of his job and that influence came with responsibility. Carrie's response was sharp, each word measured and deliberate. I am not hiding. I am setting boundaries. And the fact that you can't recognize the difference shows exactly what's wrong with this discussion. You think that because I agreed to appear, I gave up the right to basic respect. That's not how it works. The audience, who had watched with bated breath, now realized the gravity of what was unfolding. Some murmured in support, others exchanged uncertain glances, and the tension was almost tangible. Stephen tried once more to defend his approach, saying he was fostering accountability. Carrie's gaze didn't waver. She reminded him that accountability meant little if it ignored boundaries and the humanity of the person in front of him. She had not come to be lectured or cornered. She had come to share her music, her stories, and her journey. Finally, Carrie turned fully toward the stage exit. She spoke one last time, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had reached her limit, yet controlled and composed. Some things cannot be resolved in front of an audience. Maybe that's something worth thinking about. The audience gasped, understanding that this wasn't dramatics. This was a conscious decision. She walked off the stage with dignity intact, leaving behind a silence louder than applause. Stephen's hand remained outstretched for a moment, a futile gesture. His face reflected disbelief, frustration, and a dawning recognition that he had misjudged both the situation and the woman standing before him. The cameras lingered as the studio settled into stunned quiet, capturing a moment that would be replayed and dissected endlessly. Carrie Underwood had left not out of weakness, but out of conviction. She had made it unmistakably clear that authenticity and respect were non-negotiable, and that the pressure to perform morality or